honestly, it's devastating to see this happening yet again in another part of Australia. Uh, my feeling is that we need to stop thinking about this as unprecedented, random, unexpected. We're seeing this happening year on year in different communities. And the really critical thing now is for us to make sure that every post-disaster dollar that we spend is helping to prevent a future disaster. So, we need to make sure that we are building these houses back differently rather than putting people back in the same housing that was not resilient and saw them lifted out of these floods. We need to make sure that any insurance payments that these people may have can be contributed to in ways that will help to make a more resilient home. That could be raising it above the flood levels. It could be retrofitting it so that it's something that we can hose out and get people back into more quickly without fear of mould. Or it could be that some of these houses we see are not viable where they currently are, and it's time to consider how we're going to use a combination of government funds and any private sector funds that might come to those homeowners to help relocate them or buy their houses back.
Was there something about this event, though, that drew a line in the sand, if you like, that the conditions were more intense than were expected, and also that properties that have never flooded before were inundated?
Yes, and that's the thing where I'm getting a little tired of the word unprecedented, because we are seeing that yet again, somebody who didn't think they could flood and did think they were safe is being flooded. And we have to accept that these catastrophic events are more severe. They are more unexpected. Well, when I say unexpected, they're causing much bigger losses to people who thought that maybe they were safe. And therefore, that we need to really pay attention to upgraded flood maps, much more dramatic future projections of what can go wrong, and start adjusting the housing stock right now.
You mentioned insurance there. One of the criticisms of insurance payouts, if of course you can get insurance on some of the floodplains in the first place, is that when you have your payouts, it's a like-for-like rebuild. Should there be more, as you said, a focus on rebuilding back better and making those properties more resilient? And what changes would that involve?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, that has been baked into the insurance mindset for a long time, that, you don't profit from disaster, but you do get back what you had. I think that insurers have really tried to embrace that recently with different types of resilience programs, but there's no clear path for taking the money that you've got, which is enough to build you back in your existing conditions, but it might cost more to build you back better. Where is that more money going to come from? So you insured for the value of the house as it is. We need to build it to a more expensive standard that will be more resilient and stop you having a loss next time. And that's where I would see that we need to have some way of upgrading that insurance payment and working with the insurance payment, perhaps through some of the government funds that will also possibly flow, as we've seen with Stronger Homes grants, Resilient Homes funds and programs, putting those two sources together and making a house that is secure against not just the flood we just experienced, but given we're saying we didn't know we could experience that, and secure against the flood we might still be to experience under a climate change scenario.
Okay, so those bigger solutions then, Paula, such as buybacks or relocating communities, they don't come cheap, do they? So who should pay?
Yeah, look, the truth is they don't come cheap, but at the same time, continuously putting people back into housing and then having to fix them again in another, 5 years, 10 years, let's face it, in Brisbane, in Ipswich, we saw 11, we saw 22. We've seen this in places where we're getting floods, even modest flooding every 5 years. That's not cheap either. So under the circumstances, we need to take a longer term cost benefit view and accept that we need a program of moving people out of the way of risk. We're probably going to need to keep those people insured in some subsidised way as well, because insurance is great. It brings global capital and private sector capital to help make people good after a disaster. When they fall out of that, we've only got our own domestic public sector capital. So if we can find some public-private collaboration, risk pools and things like that that extend to all these key disasters, we'll keep people insured, we'll keep some global capital coming, and then we'll blend that with our domestic capital and, a long-term buckling our belts and saying we need to change Australia, and that is going to cost, but it is more expensive not to.
And the Insurance Council data shows that those at the highest risk of flooding tend to be from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. That compounds the problem and makes it more heartbreaking.
Yeah, it absolutely does. We don't want to be a country of widening inequality and inequity. And certainly these sorts of disasters, you quickly find out who the haves and have-nots are, because some who are better off are able to, for example, do the top up themselves to become more resilient, potentially have the funds and the resources to move if need be. What we do see is that those who can least afford it, at least afford the insurance, and are also at the highest risk, will fall further and further behind. And that will come at a cost to society, because that's people who can't work. That's people who, when they're out of their homes, face rising rental markets. After any of these disasters, and we'll see this here, the rental market will go through the roof because the demand will be higher than supply. So those people will be wasting money on rent that, they need to get themselves back on their feet. Which is why I would say that that public-private solution, that's subsidizing that kind of person to keep them, or that kind of income, not that kind of person, that person who has, for whatever set of circumstances, that income, is able to stay in the insurance net while we work out how to change their risk profile so that it's easier for them to afford the insurance that they need. And, that's a compassionate solution, but a compassionate solution is also often the most economically sensible solution.
Good to talk to you, Paula. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.